Call to order a work session of Goodyear City Council, Monday, September 20th. All items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. We have 3 items on our agenda. We'll start with Paul Louisi on the fireworks and new state law relative to that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm going to talk about the consumer fireworks. Currently, City Code prohibits use of consumer fireworks within the city limits without a permit. The new firework bill allows for the sale of consumer fireworks in Arizona effective December 1st, 2010. Then they go further to kind of define what a consumer firework is, a device that contains restrictive amounts of pyrotechnic composition designed primarily to produce visible or audible effects by combustion. And there are several types that fall into that category, and we'll go through each of those. You have the ground and the hand sparklers. A 2008 study by the CDC noted that these injuries from sparklers accounted for over half of the injuries to children below 5 years old. They get relatively hot, about 1,200 degrees, if that's relative. So it is pretty hot in those little kids' hands. Also, we have fountains, usually cone-shaped devices that sit on the ground and shoot off a shower of colorful sparks. They don't go up very high, and they don't last very long. And then we have smoke bombs that fall into this category as well. They don't explode, they just smoke. Generally, 2 types of smokers exist, a colored smoke or a cylindrical smoke grenades. Smoke balls come in a variety of colors, look like little hand grenades. When lit, they emit a thick cloud of white smoke. And then we have poppers, snaps, and the snakes. Last one. Little bottle-shaped devices that have strings that when they're pulled they shoot out confetti. Snaps or pop-pops are little paper packets that contain minerals that ignite on impact with the ground. I've seen these with the kids. They make a small popping noise. Snakes are small pellets that when lit emit a long brittle carbon ash that looks like a snake coming out of the ground. And then we have ground spinners. This picture's a little slow. The name of the fireworks sum it up pretty well. They spin around on the ground. A variety of ground spinners exist. A small version of ground spinners are often called jumping jacks. A larger version of these are the blooming flowers. Illegal fireworks are any fireworks designed or intended to rise in the air and explode, or to detonate in the air or to fly above the ground. These are the bottle rockets, the missile-type rockets, Roman candles, torpedoes, or jumping jacks, or helicopters. Obviously, we're surrounded by the Sonoran Valley and the desert conditions. With the dry conditions, we're very, very cautious when we use open flame and or allow any type of fireworks that could ignite a desert fire. Certainly some damage that can be caused by fireworks. We had a large fire back in 2005 that was caused by fireworks at the King's Ranch. So. Public-private property damage. Nationwide, estimated 22,000 reported fires were started by fireworks in 2008. These fires resulted in $42 million in damage. In May 30th, 2005, we had that 2-alarm brush fire that burned nearly 100 acres in King's Ranch that was started from fireworks. Personal injuries. Fireworks are often part of special times like the 4th of July, New Year's Eve, but fireworks can be dangerous. In 2008, an estimated 7,000 people were injured and treated in emergency departments for a variety of injuries. And half of those were injured were children. Types of injuries that they have, body parts are the hands, fingers, eyes, and legs account for most of those injuries, and also burns. Burns were the most common injury to all the body parts except for the head and the eyes, where bruising, cuts, and foreign bodies in the eye were more frequent. Fireworks can cause blindness, third-degree burns, and permanent scarring. All this was from the Centers of Disease Control. we look at a state-by-state comparison. 40 states allow some types of consumer fireworks. 5 states allow only sparklers or other novelty types of fireworks. Arizona is the only state that allows novelty fireworks. 4 states ban all consumer fireworks, and state laws regulating the sale of fireworks have a direct impact on the incident or loss. More stringent laws have been more responsible for a decrease in injuries in the last decade, from a high of 12,000 in 1990 to a low of 7,896. What are we recommending? While we can't prohibit the sale according to the state law, we do recommend that they post signs to the persons engaged in the sale of those fireworks with a civil penalty imposed if they do not comply. And because of our dry desert conditions and concern for the safety of our citizens, we recommend that the use of consumer fireworks be prohibited within the city limits. And I'll open up for any questions.
Did you say we can't prohibit the sale?
Correct.
They could sell them within the city, they just couldn't explode them within the city if we
Correct.
pass that?
And these are just consumers. Anything that's used for the 4th of July at the ballpark type of event would be professional grade that they need a permit for, so that wouldn't change. These are consumer fireworks. So, yes, we cannot prohibit the sale, the way the state law reads, but we could prohibit the use.
Interesting.
You aren't asking anything from us today or later, right?
No.
No, strictly in full.
Later,
Later,
yes, we would be
I'm
bringing
gonna-
something back to you, should
For
you
vote.
agree with this recommendation.
Can I see the recommendation again?
Can I have some clarification? Okay, so at the very beginning, you were showing the
The current,
no,
sorry.
the fireworks for the kids set off most
Yep.
of the time. And for the last couple years, I know that Target's been selling all those kinds of things.
Correct.
So are we prohibiting those also? Or are we only prohibiting?
Prohibiting the use. They can sell them. We can't stop the sale within the city. We would prohibit the use within the city.
Just a quick question, do you think there's going to be a problem with a lot of the ones when they buy them not quite being clear of where the city limits are? So you may have some of them going out on a lot of our county islands, or when they find an open field. So instead of shooting them off maybe in their backyard, they may be encouraged to go out in the desert, and which you don't want them doing, setting them off, because they can't do it inside the city limits. And that would be my only concern, is that we may encourage them to go out in the desert where we don't want them, if we sell it. I mean, is there any thought along those lines?
We, unfortunately, I think within this, we can only police what is in
Yeah.
our city limits. We can't really control. And, what we've seen in the past, and I know through John's experience, he's shared with us that they'll sell on those county islands because they know they can kind of get around the law that way, so.
No, but you can see the concern is that,
Yes, absolutely.
that instead of setting them off maybe in their yard or backyard, they will take them out in the desert where they're not quite sure whether it's city limits or not, and set them off there where we don't want them, because that's where the greater chance of fire is going to be.
Correct.
Especially in this environment where the weeds are an issue and people aren't trimming those down, and you have a dry season, next thing you know, we have some real issues.
Correct.
I don't know if you have these figures, but the number of accidents or injuries that occurred within city limits are substantially higher.
Yeah.
Because most of them take place within the city limits. The legislature, in my estimation, was very foolish to approve this law. I mean, it puts the city councils into the difficult position of saying, hey, you can't do that in this city. I doubt that Maricopa County Board will do anything with that to prohibit it within Maricopa County, but our only possibility of stopping the injuries to the kids and the fires in homes and everything else is to do a prohibition.
So then you're saying there's a possibility that the county could actually say you couldn't use it in the county, then they can sell them, but you can't use them anywhere in the state, because you're either county or...
You could do it nowhere in Maricopa County, yes,
Okay, yeah.
but you could go to Pinell County.
So they'd have to do it county by county, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of how many incidents we had last year or years before? But
Like-
by the police?
I can get those.
Hold out for that.
I can get those numbers from the fire perspective, but from
And we can get
police.
them from a police call, too.
Yeah, fine, okay.
What are the neighboring cities doing right now?
We know that Avondale's going to hold tight. They're not going to do anything right now. City of Phoenix is being pretty aggressive with it. Buckeye, I'm not really sure about what their stance is at this point. But it's either they're going to enforce it or they're kind of just holding back to see what happens. So
And are we going to look, I mean, what kind of penalty are we going to look at for this? Have we gotten that far with this yet?
yeah, it was a misdemeanor.
Sorry, what was the question?
What type of penalty? If someone does start a fire, or, I mean, is there any additional penalties, like the stupid motorist law where you have to pay for the,
I think there's provisions in the state law that require, that provide for some cost reimbursement. Ours, and I think we incorporate that into our draft ordinance as well.
We did.
But we're generally calling for a Class 3 misdemeanor for the improper use within the city by an individual, but the failure to post the signage
Yeah.
is a civil violation.
okay.
So, not that I would know any teens that would do something like this, but if they were out there New Year's Eve or whatever with some of these simple ones, how are we going to be monitoring it? I mean, they're going to be, and I guess, you know what, of the 15 years that I've been here, I always kind of thought we already had a law that said we didn't have them anyway. So how is this any different than what we already had? Because I guess I didn't really
They would
know
need.
the difference.
They always needed a permit before from the fire chief or fire
really?
marshal. Yeah. So now what we're saying is we want to just prohibit the whole use of them.
I see. So
To
okay.
not even allow the permit process to occur either.
Oh.
And some of those you were talking about, like the ones that, the confetti, do those have a spark that does that as
Yeah.
well? So there is
Yep.
ignition for all of those?
There's ignition for those.
Party
Yep.
poppers.
Yep.
I've seen all of these. Okay.
I didn't know
Gosh.
there was a spark on some of those, that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
So we haven't been regulating them except through permitting.
Correct.
Permitting sparklers, too? Has that been required?
The sale.
Our previous ordinance outlawed fireworks, except for the commercial-grade fireworks
Right.
that needed to be permitted. Like these novelty fireworks were previously prohibited by ordinance.
Right.
But now we have the new state regulations that you're going to have to redraft your ordinance to comply with the state regulations, which permit some novelty fireworks, but not the whole gamut.
So we'd have to rewrite our
Ordinance.
ordinance
Yeah.
if we wanted to disallow any fireworks.
I guess I'm not sure what we're doing here.
Now, neither.
Well-
Doesn't make sense.
We have an ordinance on the books right now that says fireworks are prohibited, and so
All
we
fireworks.
Yeah,
All fireworks.
with the exception of these large display fireworks. Yeah. So at minimum, we're going to have to amend our ordinance to comply with the new state statute. But the state has given city councils the authority to permit the use of fireworks within cities or to prohibit. So we have to clean up our current ordinance to comply with state statute, but you need to make a policy decision on whether or not you would like to allow the sale of or the use of fireworks in the city or not within these certain classifications.
So this really, from the standpoint of use, doesn't change anything, because we didn't allow it to be used before.
Well, but there's going to be some that are yes and no.
See why
I don't see that.
this is confusing.
Well, let me ask you this. If we don't do anything, then they'll be able to fire off those class of fireworks come December 1, right? So if we,
Necessarily.
no?
I don't, the way I understand it, they're still prohibited in the city,
Oh, yes. They're still
because
prohibited.
the state
yes.
will allow the sale of them within the
Correct.
city as of December 1st.
But you could have a definitional problem under the current statute.
Right.
Under our current ordinance, it's going to be too broad because it just says fireworks, and it doesn't delineate between the ones that are going to be allowed by the state statute.
Right.
So you have a definitional problem. You need to, we do need to clean up our statute, our ordinance to comply with statute.
I guess the real policy question boils down to, do you want fireworks in the city? And then we can bring back an ordinance that says yes, I mean, or do you not want them? Do you want to continue the policy of not having fireworks blown off within the city, but recognizing that the state has authorized the sale of them within the city.
Can you send us a yellow paper or something that shows us that ordinance and what's
Sure.
you're saying, plus, I guess.
And we can
if it's a
attach the
misdemeanor,
proposed ordinance, too.
Right. And then what the, whether it started a fire or whether it's just kids that were caught from, what are the
Okay.
repercussions of it, please?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we have a draft
I
ordinance.
think
We
I
can
need
send
to
it out.
understand wrong.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have Tim Newbill to talk about the emergency operations plan. Tim?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. How are we doing this evening?
Great.
I'm just here to talk about the City of Goodyear's Emergency Operations Plan. I'm sure you've all read it word for word. Excited about it like I am? Or not.
Right.
What we're going to discuss for the next few minutes is just the plan development, the layout of the plan. I'll briefly talk about the basic plan, appendix, and then if you have any questions, then you'll have the opportunity. Of course, if you have any questions during that time as well, please ask them. The way that our plan is set up now, starts off, of course, with a letter of promulgation, distribution list. Any changes that have been made in the past would be included in the plan, the definitions, authorities, how we can utilize our plan, and then the basic plan itself that talks about the command and control, the direction if need be, and then it's broken down into annexes, appendices, as well as tabs. The main thing that I want you all to know about our plan is that we do have an all hazards plan. It's not just looking at the acts of terrorism. We're not just looking at natural disasters, but we're looking at natural, man-made, as well as the possibility of terrorism. Right now, this is how our plan is broken down. So when I just mentioned that it is an all hazards plan, this is what we are looking at as far as what we consider the possibilities of things that may occur either in the City of Goodyear or in surrounding areas of the City of Goodyear, as well as if it's something throughout Maricopa County that our police and fire may have to respond to if it's on a large enough scale.
Are you going to tell us how you're coordinating with other agencies?
Coordinating the plan?
Yeah, in emergencies.
Yes, what we do, sir, is in our plan, our basic plan discusses how we as a city, a local entity, would respond, but then also Maricopa County Department of Emergency Management is the one that we work with to put the plans together for the cities. And then also through our NIMS, National Incident Management System, the training of which we've received throughout the city and other agencies have received, it gives us training about the incident command system that allows police and fire, public works, and other agencies to work together in a seamless manner. So all of the cities within, matter of fact, throughout the country, we are learning how to respond in a similar fashion. So there will be, we will have as few problems as possible as far as how we communicate in a large-scale incident. But it first starts at home. So if there's any incident, we would have to make sure that how we respond as far as the mayor and council, as far as directors, police chiefs, fire chiefs, and then as well as the employees, how do we respond in the incident as well.
Okay.
What's a common carrier accident?
Common carrier, or I-10, whether it's the diesel trucks that drive up and down the freeway,
Or
common carrier,
a bus.
or correct. This right here, I just want to put this up here because when we talk about our plan and how it is, if we have to activate our emergency operations center or if there's going to be some type of response. So you had mentioned about the other agencies. Right here from Homeland Security Presidential Directive number 8, one of the things that was put out is that we needed to make sure that the training that was received was across the board the same for everyone. And to the City of Goodyear's credit, if you see all the classes that are up there, we have about 532 people that have gone through the IS 100 training. 157 has gone through 200. 33 have gone through 300, 400 training. Another 531 employees have gone through the 700 training, and about 54 of them, or 69% that were required to, has gone through the 800 training. And this all came about from just the large-scale incidences and from 9/11, how the president didn't like the response in which they were seeing from police and fire and public works. Fire was not able to talk to fire, police not able to talk to police, so now we're able to communicate.
And that's the reason to put the question to it. The coordination is very important, not only from here, but with other agencies that we may have to call in an emergency.
Correct. What we do is, as an emergency manager, we have West Valley emergency managers as well as East Valley emergency managers. We have meetings, we connect, we look at how our emergency operations centers are set up. So we have, as a matter of fact, about 20 of the employees of City of Goodyear just went through what is called Web Eoc Training, which is a software-based training that if there's a large-scale or an incident within Maricopa County, that we're not only connected with an Avondale, but we can be connected with Maricopa County as well as the state of Arizona, and then all of the agencies throughout Maricopa County or Pinal County if we have to. So we just received that training on September 15th and 16th from Maricopa County Department of Emergency Management. So that's how we coordinate with other agencies. And of course, fire, you know, they coordinate all the time because they receive information from Phoenix Fire as far as responding to calls. So some of the agencies do it naturally. And what we're trying to do now is to get people to understand that it's not just a police fire, but it's a public works and a parks as well incident that we're looking at. So we're bringing them all into the fold as far as receiving this training. And then lastly, the last one I wanted to point out is that ICS overview for executives and senior officials. That's something for you all if you'd like to just go online and sort of get an overview of what the incident command system, what it's about, and what your roles may be if there's a need to activate the Emergency Operations Center, or if there's something as a large-scale event, as far as how you would fit into that, to your role as well. So that's just something if you have an extra hour or two, you're not watching the Phoenix Suns or the Diamondbacks. Okay.
Diamondbacks.
I notice you don't mention the Cardinals.
Well, after 41-7, I don't know if it would be right for me to mention them right now. So are there any questions that you all would have? Yes, sir.
Yeah. This, in looking at this and listening to you explain what this is, this really is a responsibility of every citizen that lives in Goodyear. And do we have opportunities for citizens to take some kind of training to also be a part of this? Because you're going to need more than just, I mean, I don't know what the disaster could be, but I would think that you would at least want your citizenry to be aware of what is happening and not be in the way, but at least be a helpful part of it.
Well, actually, we do. Through our CERT program, we offer the NIM 700 and 100, which is
so that's
the
in the
very
CERT
basics
program.
of it. But also on ready.gov, which is a public domain, you can go on ready.gov, and also from personal to family planning, and then how you could assist if there's a large-scale incident. You've heard people talk about the 72-hour kit or go bag and what have you. It talks about those things as far as personal safety and family safety, and then that actually falls into a response from police or fire.
Because where would if we needed to evacuate the city as a citizen and never been involved with anything the city council did or the city, where do we evacuate to? That direction or that direction or that? Where do we go?
Actually, that would be determined by the incident, depending on where the incident. If it was at Halliburton, then obviously we would go east. But if it was something that was going on that was east of us, then we would have people
If it were
evacuate to the
Palo
west.
Verde, I wouldn't go east, I'd go north or south because the wind blows this way.
Well, all of that is taken into consideration when you activate the chemical, biological,
I understand.
radiological, nuclear, explosive sea burning team, because they would bring out, and we're looking at wind conditions, and they are working with Palo Verde, Arizona Department of Emergency Management. And so there's that connectivity that we have already. We do exercises and drills with Palo Verde, Maricopa County, as well as Arizona Department of Emergency Management. As a matter of fact, there will be an exercise here, I believe in October, with Maricopa County and Palo Verde, because they're looking at utilizing Desert Edge High School as a hot site. So if the people are leaving from the Buckeye area to get out of the hot zone, then they will possibly be coming here to the city of Goodyear. So we're working with police and fire to see what the response would be and how would we be able to take that in. As well as there's also a city-wide exercises coming up on October 15th with police, fire, public works at Estrella Foothills High School, so we can work on this connectivity and coordination as far as how would we respond. So we are doing training and exercise throughout the city as well as throughout the county to make sure that it's not the first time that we meet one another in case something happens.
Are we prepared to meet an incident such as happened in California, the gas line explosion?
Are we prepared?
Yeah. If something like that were to happen here.
What I can tell you is that we have the resources available to respond very confidently, yes. But that's an explosion. I mean, I don't know how prepared you can be, but we do have relationships with SRP, APS, and all of those entities, and police and fire works with them. So we do have the relationships in place to where it would be somewhat smooth or seamless.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Tim, well, I appreciate you bringing this to the council. About 6 months ago, I took a 2-day training class for leaders and disaster plan training, and I have 4 pages of questions for you. I'm not going to make you answer them here tonight, but I am going to go ahead and just ask them, because I want, besides the fact that you're going to try to read my handwriting, I just want to quickly let people know these are the things that, I consider all of us to be thinking about. Do we have a damage assessment team? Does that plan include Mobile? Do we have a city master plan showing the culverts? Do we have technology through GIS systems that can show our flood zones? Do we have current floodplain maps? Do we have a predestined place for evacuations? Kind of back to what Frank was just asking. In partnership with other cities or towns. Do we have a hazmat 5-year plan? Again, with the culverts. For some reason, that just kept being put into our minds. Do we have a decontamination drill? Do we have a written PIO policy? Do we have mutual aid with away cities, such as Avondale has with Payson? Some of that is for info record sharing for like IT and finance, which I know we do have some of that already in place. How do we sustain all of our hazmat materials? Who has the can't read my own writing. Who has the
Continuity of operation?
The COOP? Yes.
Continuity of operation.
And is it 3-person deep? That was another thing they always said, 3 people deep. Do we have something in place to ban the liquor and gun sales? Are we cross-training our employees for disasters such as Park and Rec in different areas? Do we have a debris removal contract? Is it with Waste Management? And do we have our own personnel that might be overlooking whoever that contract's with so that no fraud would take place, watching the weight of the material being removed? Do we have any partnerships for animals, such as maybe with the zoo, where we might have, like in Vanderbilt Farms, may have horses, larger animals to be taken away, or with any kind of, do we have plans with our local pharmacies and our grocery stores? Do we have anything set up with like Home Depot, anything where we'd have supplies that might be necessary, or Lowe's? I shouldn't say Home Depot, I'm sorry. What is our ISO rating? And do we have our insurance, what's this?
That's a fire thing.
Okay. Sorry. No, that's fine. Do we have cameras in place so that we are taking pictures of things going on so that we have accountability to show what's going on? And do we have a plan for rebuilding? Do we have a plan for our vulnerable areas such as the hospitals, the nursing homes, things like that? One of the key things they said was, do we have some kind of plan to get instant information to our citizens? Some people even suggested, if you have an airport in your city, is there somebody that can drive their little plane with a big banner on the back says, go to radio station, whatever, And last but not least, do we have a plan with our Perryville prison? Because evidently prisons have a great amount of materials that can be usable in a time of disaster. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So, as you can see, I was really thinking
Get
about
those in the minutes?
Oh, well, sure, but that's why I gave them to him, because I knew he could
All right.
remember everything I was just asking you. Thank you.
I would just like to say very briefly, most of this we have.
Great.
We have access to. So, like the GIS portion, I work with Corey and Ron, so those types of things we have in place. As in reference to the Home Depot, it's interesting you say that, because we were looking and working with economic development to identify those points of contact, so we would have that. In the one of the annexes that's being added to the plan is for pets and livestock, and how do we manage them and what do we do, because we know some people are not going to leave their pets in an evacuation. So there's an agreement, mutual aid agreement with American Red Cross and Humane Society in order to take care of pets and livestock. So that's part of what this plan addresses. So some of this, not all of it, is being addressed, and some of it is on the to-do list with the division of 1 point up to people. So we're getting it done.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, it was just so many, questions that it raised. It was a great conference.
And that's not a problem. It's exciting because it gives you an opportunity to understand and see what we actually do have in place. To the credit of the City of Goodyear, by just receiving the Web EOC training or the NIMS training, I can tell you right now we are probably in the 10th percentile as far as things that are being done from an emergency management perspective. It's not because of me, it's because of all of the employees of the City of Goodyear and the assistance that I received from the chiefs and the directors and the managers. So we're doing pretty good, but we can always improve. So we're looking to do that at every opportunity.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I saw that we're doing the reverse 911 with cell phones now. Is that going to be phone or is it going to be text as well? Because I like, and have you had a good response yet for people signing up with their cells?
Actually, Chris Nato is handling that.
Okay.
So I'm finding out about that as well, because we use the SIN system, Community Emergency, I think it is, network. So I'm finding out about all that, because for me it's about getting information not just to the city manager, to the mayor, and to the council, but it's also how do we get that information out to the public. And one of the concerns that we have, as a matter of fact, they're doing a conference coming up. How do you, for the deaf, if they're deaf and blind, how do you even get that information to them? So we're trying to figure all of that out. And
I know some of those school shootings they've been sending the kids, like the schools are on the text system, and
Right.
text
Correct.
is then the messages rather than hoping to get their voicemail.
But those individuals would have to sign up for their phones and supply that information, from understanding. And right now, I'm pretty limited on that, but I will be brought up to speed on it.
Maybe we mentioned Home Depot, maybe Home Depot and Lowe's.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
No, I corrected myself. And True Value, yes, and ACE, yes.
911 works on cell phones too, right?
Well, that's what you were just speaking of.
Okay, 'cause on cell, not inline.
Correct.
Okay, now, when you call 911 on a cell, do you get our 911 or do you get Phoenix's 911? Do we
Depending on
get the
where-
fire department or the police department?
Depending on where you are.
In good.
Now, if I call 911 here, but if I'm out of if I'm not in their cell tower range, then it may go to Phoenix Fire. If I'm over in Mesa, when I use my cell phone, it will probably go to theirs. as
Go to
far as their
Phoenix
PD.
or theirs,
Or
yeah.
Phoenix, right. Phoenix has their fire department, they have the call-out system, which I just went brain dead. I can't remember it right now.
But if you're in the city of Goodyear and you have a fire problem, why 911 wouldn't do you any good if you're calling them here.
Oh, you
because
said
they're
if I'm
going-
in Goodyear.
Well, they have you just transfer.
We talked about that today.
You just push a button and it's transferred to the
Right.
fire. That's why we have a 911 system.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, council
Automatic.
members, the cellular phone technology that we currently have triangulates. And so it attempts to locate that 911 call made from a cellular phone to the closest public safety answering point or PSAP, which is improvement over the first 911 system. Because it's triangulating, it may or may not get the right one, but it'll be a lot closer than previous to that, all 911 calls went to Maricopa County and had to be sorted out. So it gets it close, and then once if it does go to the wrong PSAP, it's a simple function of pressing a button and it gets transferred to the correct location.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Let me ask you a question, and let's brainstorm something for a minute, I think. If it were necessary to mass evacuate this area, you can go north, you can go east, you can go west, but you can't go south. Palo Verde precedes 55 to 60,000 Goodyear residents. When Palo Verde was built, there wasn't an Estrella, I don't think. There wasn't a Canyon Trails, there wasn't that sort of thing. So when it was built, there was no need to even consider those areas because no one lived there. Well, things have changed.
Right.
Now, if you had a broken arrow at Palo Verde, you wouldn't get on I-10. It's going to be backed up to Phoenix. You aren't going to go east. And the only two directions you can go really are east or south. And south-southwest is the safest way to go, assuming normal wind flows. So the best thing for us to do, if we could, would be to go south, I think, in normal wind conditions. The thing is, there's no way to go south.
Right. Exactly.
But there was a plan to go south. And I don't know if we called it the Rainbow Valley Parkway or the Sonoran Valley Parkway. Sonoran Valley Parkway. Is this a reason for us to go to the federal government to seek funding for that? That from the standpoint of reaction to a nuclear accident, the potential of that, that's the only way we're going to save our people, probably, if in fact there were a significant radioactive material release, is to go south-southwest quickly.
That's a great question.
So, and we want that road. That road is, John, it's somewhere in the EIS process.
Yes, it's approaching being completed. So
Yeah, so if that were done, this is something we could add to the list for federal government funding.
it would
That
be
we
a
need
great
it.
idea.
We need it for our safety.
I would agree.
And we obviously need it for our community anyway,
Well, yeah.
for the development of that area. So it's something to think about.
That's a good idea.
Well, I think first you need to talk about an assembly area. Palo Verde itself has an assembly area, which is east. It's at the Buckeye Airport. So if those alarms go off and you're at Palo Verde working on site, your van picks you up and takes you to the Buckeye Airport, and that's the assembly area. To me, there's a fallacy in that because you're going east, number one. Then you get to Buckeye, to the airport, where we're supposed to assemble and wait for directions. Most of these guys who are in these vans, when they get on that I-10, they're going home. They're not going to stop at the Buckeye Airport. But there should be an assembly area. I mean, the plan makes sense in the fact that they need an area so that you can give direction where to go and how to get there. And as the mayor said, problem with the winds always come from the west to the east, and we should go south. I mean, that makes the most sense. But we can't get there because we don't have a route to it. And I think this is a very good point. I think we could use that.
You know, Congressman Franks, you know, he seemed open to ideas such as, we didn't talk about that sort of thing, but I was sort of surprised as a Republican congressman, he understands that there won't be any earmarks through that Republican caucus, but he's looking a little bit down, see what he thinks maybe there will be. And if there were, this is a valid requirement, frankly.
Well, not only is it a valid requirement, Mr. Mayor, it's not as much of an earmark in the transportation process, because the transportation process does give specific projects within their Azte and different programs that they're sponsoring. So it would be a very good thing to go after.
Well, let's find out anyway. Yeah, if you all agree.
Disaster reliever plan, and then we have this expensive Cotton Lane Bridge that we put in place for disaster relief. yeah, sure. Okay. That's a good idea, Jim. That's a good idea.
But getting down towards Gila Bend is the thing you want to be able to do under normal wind conditions, I would think.
Yes.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Brian Dolkey.
And we have Brian and Mike Svets and Nathan Torres doing the next presentation. If all of them would come up now. Over there.
It's a deal. Okay, good evening. Looks like Nathan will be up here in a minute. We're breaking this presentation up in a couple of parts. As you'll see on here, we actually, it looks like I'll be doing the majority. I am not doing the majority. I'm doing some background and then talking about some of the financing as a reminder where we're at. But the bulk of this presentation will be talking about the operations, and that's where Nathan Torres will be joining Mike for part of that. Okay, real quickly, and you've seen several of these or some of these slides before, but it was in the late 90s when we got our first taste of spring training, and we were approached by the Astros and then also by the Dodgers. It was that point in our community, based on our ability to go forward, we just could not financially. We could not get participation at that point either. And fast forward to 2003, 2004, Artie Moreno, who was a major property owner in this city, he approached us to move his Angels here to Goodyear on his property that was actually adjacent to where we're at now with the ballpark. The public did approve $10 million bond by a 2/3 majority vote, and that was in September 2004. It was right after that vote that Artie Moreno decided to go ahead and stay within Tempe and do the expansion there. But we had the public that already came out and we had the support for going forward with spring training. So in 2006, we did a request for interest. We were trying to stay around the I-10 corridor area. We were looking for upwards of 120 to 150 acres. And we wanted to team up with someone that could provide the land at little or no cost, as well as also do development around our investment. So with that, we had three parties that were interested. Rolls Property, affectionately known as the Trotting Track, was one of them. EJM, where the current Cancer Treatment Center of America is, and then also where we did ultimately end up going on the Wood family property. So that got us up to that point. And there's a closer up view of that, but it was really deemed that it would help spur City Center. It seemed like a great location. We also had a partner with JMI Sports that could help us out on the baseball side, because the good news is we had
public support. Bad news is we had no teams that showed an interest at that point. We did focus all of our interest, by the way, for Grapefruit League teams, so as to not cannibalize Cactus League teams in Arizona. So we had our first spark of hope was from the Indians, and Mayor, you probably remember this. We went back in May 2006, took a project team back there and talked about the assets of the area. It really gained their interest. And then at that point, they said, we're interested. They sent out their attorney and their CFO, and I think a future draft pick to be named later, which we never got. A little bit of a joke there. But what really piqued their interest was the quality of this community and the growth that we had here. So it really changed their view, and I will tell you that they were also looking at Florida options as well, but we absolutely made it happen here, and obviously they're pleased to be here. Now, over the course of a couple of years, we had 40-plus agreements that came before council and a variety of things. You'll see them on here. Memos of understanding, that's basically a document that has business points in there of things we'll finish negotiating later, but we had 6 of those alone. We also worked with obviously the Cleveland Indians on an MOU. We had one with the Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority, and that was approved in December of 2006. We had one with Goodyear Baseball, which is JMI Sports, primarily the designer, the architect. We had use agreements with the teams. We had to do land conveyance, infrastructure agreements, development agreements, et cetera. You'll see those on here. But it was just a lot of work in a pretty concise period of time. So I won't go into all the details of this. Mike will be covering this in his presentation. But this 47 acres comprises the Indians complex. It's about 42,000, almost 43,000 square feet of their, what we call their clubhouse training center and under roof. The grand opening, that was in September of 2008. And then spring training, one of the things to point out is they have about 400 to 500 staff, players, coaches that are here during the spring training. All their minor leaguers, single A, all the way up to major leaguers, so it is a big impact. The other thing is we really focused on was year-round presence by them. So they do control 2 of the fields, and then some of the smaller fields too that Mike will talk about. In the Goodyear Ballpark, that was done at the same time. 8,000 fixed seats, 1,600 on the berm. We do have the group seating out there in the right field pavilion. We have that 3rd level deck. So we did some things very different than what has been done previously, where our suites actually go out into the open and not stay behind glass. Our ultimate goal was, you have a lot of costs that's in this, so incrementally, if you get a second team, it really adds to the revenues and also the number of games that you get here. So we never lost sight of having a second team. However, the STA asked us to back off on trying to secure a second team. You may remember that very well. Until the White Sox had an opportunity to work through their situation down in Tucson. Well, we agreed to a year wait. However, what happened a couple of months after we tentatively agreed to that, the Reds came into town. They were here on Major League Business Owners meetings. So they came out here and toured, and they used the expression, in fact, I have one hanging in my office, we knocked their socks off. They really were not looking at this as an option, but it just, it did catch their attention. And if you remember, we did a 75-day exclusivity agreement with them, meaning they could not talk to any cities in Florida, nor anyone else. And in fact, 71 days later, we had Azte support, council support, and we had a memo of understanding in place. Then one of the things, and I'll refer to it a couple of times when I get into some subsequent slides, but it was in April of 2008 where Azte came up with what they called a funding blueprint. So this was a blueprint that said, all right, here is the priority reimbursements that we will be doing, and I'll go through that in a minute. Very important to come back to that. But that was done in April 2008. And what it did is it allowed the funding to be kicked up a little bit from 50% to two-thirds for the Indians in the ballpark. Again, I'll hit that in a little more. The groundbreaking for Reds, November 2008, completed in August 2009, and it's almost a mirror image of what you see with the Indians. So really an economies of scale for that project. Came in $3.3 million under, of which we were able to use some of that funding to then go to our debt service, which the Public Improvement Corporation bonds are paid out of general fund. So here's the Reds Development Complex, 44 acres, 43,000 square feet clubhouse. And that was, just like the Indians, it brings 400 to 500 players at spring training. And I will tell you that the Reds have given this facility a lot of credit for where they're at this season. I mean, they're in first place in their division. And they said it really set a foundation here for training, of which they really feel it was a big part of it. Okay, use agreement, financial business points. Each of the teams, we have 20-year use agreements. With that, we have a lot of requirements in there both directions. One is that they have to play minimum of 14 games here per year, and that we own the facilities. We own the clubhouse. We own the entire complex. Now, what they do is they in turn rent out the clubhouse for $1,000 per year, and then that's tied to CPI, so there's a slight adjustment each year, each and every year.
100,000.
100,000.
Okay.
Did I say 1,000?
Yes.
I missed a week in the first grade, so those zeros, but 100,000, and that gives them the rights to the two fields and some of the smaller half fields, agility field, and the clubhouse itself. We also did something in looking around, talking to cities. We set aside a capital replacement fund. So we go out 21 years and looking at life cycle of equipment when it needs to be replaced. For this reason, we did not want to have to come back to council each and every year as you start to replace some of the aging equipment, backstops, screens, those types of things. So this will build up a pot of money over time. There will be a point where it won't be sufficient, such as a facility starts aging, so we will have to augment it in the future, probably after around 2018.
Excuse me. So are you saying there's $500,000 in there right now?
We actually have. It's been pre-funded. I believe we're around $800,000+ in that fund right now. And what we do when we hit that $1.5 million max, we do not have to put more into it. But if we spend any of it, we have to kick it back up to that $1.5 million.
So who gets to, if council was to say, Mr. Dahlke, that $800,000 that's sitting there right now, that's a good reason to sit, but we are having financial difficulties. Can we say, let's use it for something else, or is it tied up?
Contractually, we are absolutely tied. It has to be used specifically for the development complexes and/or the ballpark. So, yes, we're contractually tied to that. Now, the way we fund that, when you buy a ticket there, the premium surcharge and the suites, we get 100% of that incremental revenue, and that's primarily what goes into this fund. So it's worked out pretty well. Revenue splits, you'll see that on here. This mirrors pretty much very much what all the other cities do in spring training. So tickets, the first digit you see is what the teams' share of the revenues are. So they get 80%, we get 20%. And the concessions, 50-50, and you'll see through here where it really outlines how much that they get with these. The naming rights, if we were ever to get naming rights, we would get 100% of those revenues. But once again, back on the capital replacement fund, that is used specifically for equipment, definitely not for operations.
Brian, real quick, on that $100,000 annual rent, that's on their clubhouse, right? We have a 50-50 split on the novelties, but do we get any rent from them for the ball fields?
The rent, that $100,000 is an all-in. That counts the clubhouse, That counts them using the fields, all the fields during spring training. That counts their use at the ballpark itself when they do have the spring training games. So that's their all-in number. Now, they are responsible for the utilities for the clubhouse itself, the electric, the water consumption there. We would be responsible for the lights and the water for maintaining the turf.
What's an average annual bill of our water and light bill for that facility?
I will absolutely have Mr. Svets cover that, and he is prepared to. So some of those details he has. Okay, here is, and I don't have a lot more. I want to focus just briefly on the financing and then also on Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority. But these are the bonds that were sold for this project. You'll see that the top line there is $10 million in general obligation bonds. That was the authority given to us by our citizens. And that annual payment is about $800,000. Interest rates vary, you'll see on this slide, between 3% and 5%. The first round of bonds that went to the ballpark, and these are the 2007A PIC bonds. These for the ballpark and the Indians Development Complex, so just about $68 million. And then the last bond sale, which was done in 2008, was for the Reds. So what you'll see here is that for total for general fund debt service, it's $5.4 million a year right now. The $800,000 out of GO comes out from property tax revenues. So just to make sure that's clear. And we do have a subsidy as well. You'll notice that on the slide. When we approached council and originally talked about the Indians, we had a $1.9 million subsidy required for the Indians when they were here for a one-team complex. Part of that was for the replacement fund, $150,000 of it, and the balance was to just subsidize the operations. Mike will be going into a little more detail as far as the revenues and the operational costs. But when we got the second team, as we talked to council, that would be $2.2 million, initially $2.5 million, but really trying to settle in on $2.2 million. We're actually been able to reduce that, so we're estimating $2.1 million in a subsidy for the operations, not to be confused with the debt service. Are there any questions on this at all before I...
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
Do you depreciate the equipment, any of the replacement equipment? Is that on a depreciation scale, or we just set up a replacement fund?
It's really set up just in terms of the replacement fund, and the age of the equipment, the life cycles vary. I mean, that even includes your big air conditioning motors and things like that, but it's variable anywhere from 5 years up to 12 years on this different equipment. But we worked with, Nathan Torres worked with the teams, both teams, to come up with all the equipment that they could even think of, a very comprehensive list that developed this replacement schedule. So there was a lot of thought that went into it. Also working with Barton Mallow, our contractor, and trying to establish life cycles as well. So spent a lot of time trying to do that. So depreciation, no. Replacement, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick, Brian. The original funding blueprint was 2/3?
Original funding blueprint, I'll get to, I'm just almost to that slide. Okay. The funding blueprint will go through what Azte has agreed to reimburse us. The other thing I think it's important to point out, when we first started this project, we had what we called a revolving fund. The revolving fund was a lot of one-time money. If you remember those days where we were $22 million in construction sales tax revenues. Now we're about $3.5 million. So it was absolutely a different day. And we had looked at this as far as what we called gap financing. And the gap financing is we have 10 years interest only on that with the knowledge, at least at that time, that we would then be getting Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority reimbursements. So the model worked perfectly. Then we had this thing called the Great Recession, and I will go through some of their projections at this that they're looking forward to. Okay, here is a funding blueprint, and hopefully this will clarify that. This was done in April 2008. When we were looking at trying to secure the Reds, the Azte Board of Directors looked at this and said, okay, we need to have some type of prioritization for the funds that come in. Now, keep in mind that Azte has two pots of money. They control two pots of money. One is what we call the Maricopa County Stadium District that was established back in the early 90s that helped finance the Peoria complex. That's $2.50 per every time you rent a car. You pay it $2.50. The second part of that is you have the Sports and Tourism Authority from the proposition that was done in 2001 that allows for hotel tax and additional car rental tax. So on the funding blueprint, we will get 50% for the Indians on Priority 1. This is SD and ASDA funds, and also all the renovations that were due up through 2022. So there are several of, every time you hit a use agreement that expires, then you go into having to do renovations. So those are actually in here for funding as well. Priority 2, if they have excess funds, what happens, they'll still do renovation projects. I won't go into all the schedules on that. But what it does is it kicks up, now we have 2 teams, we get a 2/3 reimbursement. Plus it also bumps up the reimbursement on the Indians and the Ballpark. Originally that was at 50%, it jumps to 2/3 now with our second team. Then after 2031, renovations projects kick back in, and then the Priority 4 is there needs to be, as to sunsets in 2031, so there needs to be some other agency or authority that now gets the funding to help put those in place. Okay, real quickly, the Azte looks at growth projections all the time. The projections that they gave us February of this year won't be valid tomorrow. But in 2006, 8, and 10, they did projections in those years. In 2006, they thought they'd have a 1% growth rate, which was way low. They were around 7 to 9% at that point. 2008, they went to 3.6%. That allowed us to then get the Reds here as well. And now their most recent, they're varying their growth rates, and this is on the taxes of rental cars and hotels, between 2.5% and 10%. So it does vary. And winding up, this was our original agreement with the Sports and Tourism Authority. You'll see that on there, 50% of the Ballpark Indians, which was half the cost. We also get 5% accruing annually towards this. So that is that's a big revenue source as well. 2-team reimbursement, that jumped to 2/3. As I talked about previously, the Reds, it was a $28.8 million project. They'll reimburse up to $20 million of it, so close to 2/3. And then the Indians jumps from $37.5 to $50 million as well. So potential reimbursements, $70 million and 5% interest annually. So that grows exponentially over time. Okay, my last slide, and that is on the Azte reimbursements. This is them in 2008 looking at reimbursing us, and this is strictly for the Indians in the Ballpark. Does not have the Reds in this calculation. $74 million. Now, when they did their 2010 update this February, they're looking at $43 million in reimbursements to us. So they're dropping that. They're actually starting those reimbursements instead of 2017. Does not kick in until 2021. So this is something that we absolutely monitor. We will keep working with them on projections, and you know, as a lot of the cities are, because it's very important for us to have the revenues come in, not only for our ballparks, but for future renovations. So it's a work in progress from that standpoint. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, if Brian's completed, I'd like to point out that we do have guests here this evening from Sub-Zero. You may want to have Mike wait and go to the council meeting if you want to.
I think that'd be a good
I think it'd be a good idea, yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks, Brian.
So just recess this meeting for a few minutes and call your special meeting to order.
Okay. Back to the work session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Mike Spencer. The operations of the ballpark. Mike?
Great.
Nathan?
Thank you very much, John. Good evening, Mayor, council members. We're here this evening to, as soon as we get it back up, kind of give you an overview of the maintenance and operations of the ballpark, the side that I think is ever evolving, and we will present some static information initially about the facilities, the maintenance functions, the staffing levels, budget expenses, revenues, and then we'll dive into a recap of spring training this past year, as well as what our off-season utilization is, and kind of a look ahead. So I guess as soon as we get the PowerPoint up, we can get started. Perfect. All right, this is a basic org chart for the ballpark division. I don't expect you all to be able to see that. However, on the far right side, you will see where the operations is. That encompasses the folks that put spring training together and develop the utilization for the ballpark and development complexes off season. Everything else to the right, center, and left, is our maintenance operation. The blue shaded area is our vacant foreman position. If you do not know, our head groundskeeper left for greener pastures, Oklahoma, February 19th, which was the day that teams reported. So our foreman at that time, Scott Dobbins, who has a tremendous amount of experience, spent 11 years as the head groundskeeper in Maryvale, righted the ship and has recently been hired as our full-time head groundskeeper. That foreman position is still vacant at this time. This just kind of gives you a very brief...
And will remain so.
Okay. We will, from a professional staff experience, we wanted to make sure that we gave you an understanding of what we have on tap at our key leadership positions. We currently have our ticket and box office position available and vacant. We are currently recruiting for that. It's a little bit of a crunch time for us as it really kicks in about October 1st, but with the experience you see here on the professional staff, we're able to smoothly transition for a new person to be hired in the middle of October. Again, just a general overview of the ballpark, as Brian had shown a couple of different times. This is the layout and the numbers and the amenities that go with it. This is important to understand because no two training facilities are alike. We have as much, if not more, than any other training facility. Given the fact that we have two teams, we are new, and we are surrounded by, unfortunately, right now, a lot of vacant space. But since we are right now one of the newest kids on the block, you will see that we have state-of-the-art facilities and the numbers associated with it. This is the budget breakdown, and to Councilmember Pizzillo's question regarding the utilities, you will see that this was the FY10 expenditures, and this is before revenue offsets, 51% personnel to the utilities. That's 11%. Last year, you will see as we go through this that it does go up going into FY11. Part of that has to do with rate increases, and it has to do with the fact that we will have the Reds on board for a full 12 months. To answer Councilmember Pizzillo's question, about $350,000 is water, both potable and reclaimed. Much of that is spent on irrigation since we have 54 acres of turf out there. Another $175,000 on electricity, and the remaining $25,000 kind of covers trash as well as phone service.
On the lighting, the lights, they're for a while. We had some citizens calling about the lights being on and we save some money. How's that been addressed or being addressed? Or?
We did address it prior to spring training last year. What we had, unfortunately, was for the emergency lighting or security lighting around the ballpark, we had 2 bulbs on every standard that was lit. We have, and there was no way to separate out those poles. There's 8 different poles. What we have gone to is the ability to separate out those poles and use lower level lighting. So you will see as you go out there, if you go that way tonight, you'll see a much, I guess, not as bright security lighting going on. And so we did take care of that. Cost us about $3,500, but the return on the investment will be within 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
FY11, you will see that the expenditures actually go down to $3.66 million. Much of that is due to the fact that we do not have furniture, fixture, or equipment costs associated with the RED startup. Utilities do go up, as I said earlier. We have rate increases that took effect on water as of January 2010, and another rate increase will take place in the beginning of 2011. That is all Goodyear water, and we pay that bill directly to our own Water Resources Division. We don't have the equipment, and that does measure out to less than 1%.
Hey, Mike, depreciation, is that funded account that
Exactly.
Dalkey talked about?
It is.
And contracts, what are those?
The contracts,
Yes.
what are they?
Yes.
They fall under the category of the payouts associated with concessions and parking and team shop. We also have other contracts in place that deal with, I guess you want to say, we have contracts in place from a procurement perspective to purchase fertilizer, turf material, so on and so forth. It kind of is somewhat of a catch-all.
Okay.
So it's kind of a contractual obligation type of area, is what you're stating? Or is it
A lot of it has to do with, go ahead, Nate.
The primary expenditure in contracts is our player shuttle service, and that is something that we are required contractually obligated to provide that service to get the teams from the training facilities to the ballpark during spring training. So it's professional service contracts, PA announcers, things like that.
That's only for 2 months?
Correct.
And it's still 18%?
It's expensive.
And it's not all spring training.
It's not all spring training.
Also contracting, cleaning, things like that.
There's other things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a laundry list of things.
It
It's
is.
not just one item.
Correct.
But that's the major item, which you said.
18%, yeah.
Ballpark division operating expenditures, we wanted to break this out for you to show you what it costs for a maintenance operation and then the business operations. As you can see, and please do note that the maintenance operations is $2.5 million. Please keep that in mind as we start to talk about revenue and subsidy. As you know, maintenance operations are not set up to generate revenue. They are something that we have to provide regardless of how many people utilize the ballpark, how many people we put in the seats. It is the major league standard that we have to live to. And so the next slide kind of shows the revenues. $1.53 million in revenue was generated for spring training, and this is directly tied to tickets, concessions, and all the revenue splits that Brian talked about. The point to make on this is that where the money is generated is through the operations. The operations side of the ballpark expenditures are are close to $1.1 million. Generating $1.53 million basically shows a 142% cost recovery for the operations, and then an additional $450,000 that goes to covering the maintenance operations. And I know that I guess what I'm trying to bring up is the fact that the operations side of things, the side that I know that there likely will be questions on regarding contracting, covers itself and then some.
if you were going to do an income statement, you'd lump it all together and you'd still be 2 point whatever it is million.
Exactly. The net subsidy we are targeting for this year is $2.186 million.
Right.
These are the core services that maintenance provides. Key is the Major League Baseball standards that we are held to by contract. As Brian stated, there is year-round use by the teams, and even when there is not, they are not utilizing facilities. It's important to continue to maintain a standard that is acceptable. If you let it get too far away from you, you actually end up spending more money trying to get it back to a Major League Baseball standard than continuing to maintain it at that level year-round. Laundry list of different types of functions associated with the maintenance operations, and Scott does a great job in terms of managing that side of the ops.
Quick question.
Sure.
Back to the contracts. You were speaking of the bus itself. If you were to come back and say, okay, if we purchased the bus rather than going outside and contracting someone, if we purchased a bus and we had our own driver taking it back and forth, could you use that $500,000 that's in that capital account? It's equipment. Is that stretching it, or I'm just brainstorming here. That's just thinking.
I understand. I would say that it's a stretch. The services provided for transportation are an operating expense. They are not a facility capital depreciation expense. In other words, if we did go and buy a bus, I guess the best way to say it is we'd also have to turn around and try and depreciate that as well. But that is tied strictly to renovations, repairs, and maintenance that meet a capital criteria for the facilities.
And the problem with setting up your own is that if you buy a bus, then you've got to set up a maintenance facility for it. Then you've got to set up. It just goes on and on.
Great point. We actually explored
I'm
both
sure you
ways,
did.
either renting out, contracting, or we worked with Fleet to look at feasibility of purchasing buses. But those were the main points. Where do you store them, and then cost to maintain them? They're sitting idle for long periods of time, so that increases the maintenance side as well. That is one contract of many that are in that expense line. I didn't mean to say that it was the only one. So
Yeah.
cool.
Mike, when you refer to the contracts, okay, is that with each individual team that we have on board, the Cleveland Indians and the Cincinnati Reds, or is it included an outside source? And if it's an outside source, what is it?
It's the outside sources, as Nathan mentioned. I guess contracts is the best way of saying professional services, maybe is a better way of terming it. And it's the professional services that we contract with in order to operate the ballpark and the development complexes.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with the major league.
It has nothing to do with the Cleveland Indians or the Cincinnati Reds or contracting or with them, correct?
Mike, who covers the cost of the public safety at the ballpark, the fire and the police that are there? Who pays for that?
The police and fire do have line items within their budgets that do cover the public safety costs.
Now, is that cost transferred to the ballpark as part of its operating costs?
It has not been. That has been a discussion that has taken place at the budget and finance levels. To anticipate your next question, the police is approximately $88,000. That was reduced through efforts by the police department, approximately $30,000 based on what was budgeted for fiscal year 10. Fire is approximately $20,000.
The reason why I ask is we got into some discussions in the budget year on some of their overtime costs, and I think it would be helpful to kind of break that out and find out what part of those overtime costs are related to the ballpark.
I think that
I think it has
Chief
value.
Brown and Chief Luisi would best be able to answer that question. It's my understanding, that the majority of the costs associated with public safety for the ballpark are overtime, but they would be able to give you better sense in dollars and figures.
And I would just ask from a budget perspective, consider maybe, if that's a cost of operations, that somehow it finds its way to that, to that fund. I think from a cost standpoint, it'd be helpful, but that's my perspective.
Everything else is specific to the ballpark, so police and fire should be also, whether it's, their overtime or not.
Good point.
It's in terms of, capturing actual costs associated with the operations, understood completely. I think it was a matter of the fact that whether it was in police or fire or the ballpark, because there's a $2.186 million subsidy, it is general fund money, but I do understand your point.
It'd be just helpful to know the number, that's all.
Exactly. Go ahead, Dick.
If the Reds maintain their first place position at the end of the season, are we going to do anything for them, or are we going to do anything for Goodyear to say that's our team?
I think that it has definitely been brought up that if they do, in fact, make the playoffs, they are 6.5 games up right now with just less than 2 weeks to play. So the numbers are in their favor. That we're working towards identifying how we can help celebrate that at the ballpark. And I don't necessarily want to let any cats out of the bag or promise anything, but such things as potentially...
I know if it's in your plans, you don't have to bring it out there, but there's something in the works to accommodate it. Okay, that's good enough. Thank you.
The maintenance staffing levels, this just kind of gives you a breakdown of where we are at in terms of how many full-time staff we have at the Indians, Reds, ballpark, the rectangular parking lots, as well as then administration and maintenance. 7 for each DC, 2 for the ballpark, the right-of-way and rectangular fields, and then 2 that what we would call administration and equipment maintenance. We do have a mechanic on board. That mechanic basically services small engine equipment, the mowers, you name it, and also has taken on the responsibility of assisting in maintaining park equipment of similar like and size as well. So we have achieved some economies of savings, which has in turn helped free up fleet a little bit for the rolling stock that they're maintaining on a daily basis.
Mike, I hate to draw you back to the professional services, but what is the term of the contracts we have with some of these? Like, when can we renegotiate them? At what period?
The transportation one, I think I can speak to it generally. Nathan can get into the details, but we actually reached a 10-year contract for transportation services. It gave us the best value and allowed us the ability to maintain costs and budget costs looking forward, as opposed to potentially dealing with something that could fluctuate from year to year.
There are clauses it's for the city's interest, so we can relook at that at any time throughout the contract.
Mike, you had mentioned, I think it was about $400,000 of non-spring spring training type of revenue. Are you going to cover that later?
Yes,
Of
we
what
will.
makes that up? Okay.
Yes,
I'll wait.
absolutely. The next slide kind of moves from maintenance to the actual operations side. There's 2 focuses, spring training and non-spring training, and pretty much the mantra is maximize revenue, minimize expense. It's about as simple as it can get. This kind of covers all the operations and core services associated with that side of the division. Budgeting, ticket office, marketing, concessions, novelty, and so on and so forth. I think it's important to point out that the concessions, novelty, and parking, we do not deal with full-time employees. Those are specific contracts. Ovations, the Cleveland Indians, Ovations deals with concessions, Cleveland Indians deals with novelties, and Ace Parking is our contract with the parking sales.
Mike,
Yes.
and part of the ballpark, there's a part that looks like it hasn't been built out, but it's attached. What is that going to be? Like, you have the team shop on the one side. Do you know what I'm talking about?
That is the what is commonly referred to as retail liner space, and the only thing I will say is that it's currently in as part of the litigation,
Oh, okay.
And I will not go any further.
No chance for money there, then.
I will not go any further.
Can't go into that.
This is the operations staffing for the ballpark division. Facility event coordinator, and the core services performed corporate sales and sponsorship coordinator, ticket sales operations coordinator, and administration, which is made up of one administrative assistant for the entire division, the ballpark manager extraordinaire to my right, and our operations supervisor. Our operations supervisor actually oversees the first three staffing positions that you see on that board. This is a ballpark division staffing comparison of two team facilities in the West Valley. The scope is very important to understand. It kind of goes back to what we said earlier about no two facilities are alike. We're at 25. That does include the vacant foreman position. These are authorized positions. Glendale's at 27, Surprise is 27, Peoria is 21. Couple of things to note regarding Peoria. They have 3 less playing fields. They do not have any rectangular parking fields and minimal right-of-way to maintain. And they do their ticket sales through a nonprofit. Interestingly enough, though, they pay out 3% of their share in ticket sales to that nonprofit. What they do end up spending or paying out to that nonprofit over the course of a year is $175,000 to $200,000 annually. For us to run our ticket sales operation is just over $100,000. So though Peoria contracts that out and they do have 1 less full-time staff, we actually retain more dollars on a net revenue comparison than Peoria does. And the person to my right would know best because he worked there for a number of years before relocating to Goodyear.
In the case of Glendale,
yes,
I thought the teams paid for that.
The teams do pay for it. I think what we are trying to show, though, is our staffing levels in terms of what it takes to maintain and operate a facility. Whether the teams maintain it and operate it or we maintain it and operate it, that's what it takes in order to do that.
But the teams also own it, and the city of Glendale only gets use of it 5 days a year.
Correct. Any questions for me before I turn it over to Mr. Torres?
Nice job.
Thank you.
All right. The ballpark vision from early on has always, the main focus has been to take this facility, turn it into an active economic catalyst for the city, and also serve as a recreational destination for visitors and residents alike. And that really has framed our approach since very early on. Bringing the vision to life, of course, Mike mentioned maximize revenue. Very early on, we set the table, utilizing our service contracts as a revenue source. And we were able to do that with Ovations. That contract generated $1.3 million in capital investment. It will be the city's after 7 years. This is all the everything it takes to operate the stands, from the large freezer units to the cooking tools. This contract has generated over $593,000 for us, in addition to the $1.3 million that they funded for capital investment. So within the 2 years of this agreement, it's already generated $593,000 of commissions payable to the city. Another contract that we took advantage of was Ticketmaster. Again, that included we didn't have to go out of pocket for any of our ticketing units or terminals that you see at the ballpark. And they also, through royalties and commissions, pay us $35,000 annually for Ticketmaster, as well as additional marketing support. And then lastly, of course, Coca-Cola. That deal, they basically provided $35,000 worth of equipment that the city did not have to fund, and then that returns us $10,000 annually for selling Coke.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Coke we can't sell.
A quick look at 2010 spring training. Our total attendance, 127,000 this past year. That's an increase of 28% from the inaugural season of 99,000. And the Reds basically had 16 games, and that equated for 66,000, while the Indians had 14 games, and that equated to 61,000. The Indians were a little higher in average at 4,300 as opposed to the Reds at 4,100.
Nathan, overall capacity, where are we at? 50%, 45%?
We're in the 42 to 48%.
Okay. So hopefully if the Reds get in and go a little ways, that 42 may get up a little.
We will, absolutely. You know, one of the main impacts is team popularity. And of course, going into the 2010 season, the Indians had a player sale. And so they traded away some of their marquee players, didn't sit too well with fans. And we think that did have a negative impact on the Indians' attendance this year. The Reds, you know, some of their fans were still upset about the move from Sarasota to Goodyear. Families had purchased homes in Sarasota, so it's taking them a little longer to transition. But again, winning heals all.
Right.
And we're excited about their chances for postseason play. How we fared among the Cactus League, by facility, we were 6th. It's important to note that, you know, $1.4 million for the Cactus League as a whole. That's a 7% decrease from the previous year, and largely attributable to the decrease in games. In 2009, the World Baseball Classic was held here, and so therefore it resulted in more games being played.
Nathan, do you have any numbers? I mean, as a percentage, we know that we get 80% of the ticket sales and a variety of the other percentages, but do you have any estimates if we're at 42%, this is what our revenues are? If we had 50% attendance, this is what our revenues would be at 60, 70, 80? You know, see what kind of increase or impact that would be?
We have all of those clearly
okay.
drawn out and spreadsheeted out. So we live in spreadsheets and looking at those numbers. So.
But I mean, are you going to be sharing some of that tonight? So we got an idea if the push is, if there's more, you know, individuals in the seats, this is how much more we could actually generate from a revenue standpoint.
Our goal is to always put more in the seats. So I'm not sure how we'll talk about our marketing plan.
Okay.
But not necessarily. You know, the number.
Yeah, I'd just be curious. I mean, if we're at 42, what happens when we go to 52, we go to 62, we go to 72? You know, we shrink that, you know, that subsidy of 2.1. I assume that, but I don't know how much it drops. Does it drop 100? Does it drop 200? So it's just information I think would be helpful. Just get an idea if we really push to try to get more people in the seats, how much we can shrink that subsidy. Does that kind of make some sense?
It does. To give you an idea, we had 150,000 paid attendance budgeted for this current year. Associated revenue with that was 1.6.
Okay.
And we came in at 99,000 paid, which dropped those earnings to us to about 1.1.
Okay.
So the goal is obviously to try and boost as much attendance as possible.
So it sounds like it could be a significant number if, you know, that 42 goes to 52, 62, 72.
Each fan is worth to us sitting in the seat. Each fan will buy $10.60 worth of concessions and spend over $6 in the team shop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's $16 per cap, combined per cap, per one person sitting in the stands.
Okay.
Some of our marketing for 2011, let's talk a little bit about our demographic. Our median age this year was 45. Male to female ratio was 61 to 39. We'd like to see more females out to the ball, enjoying the ballpark. The number of guests from an out-of-town area this year was 56% as opposed to 55%. We really focused our approach this past year on 3 primary targets. The first target was the Goodyear West Valley resident. The second target was other visiting team fans. And then the third target was Reds Indians fans. We work closely with the teams to market to the Reds Indians fans in Ohio. So there's a lot of direct marketing that goes on inside their current venues to promote Goodyear, to promote spring training. Locally, we used all channels, print, radio, web, direct mail, non-traditional revenue approaches such as trading out tickets for radio time or working with different sponsors that had radio time and basically tying everything together. and there was the result, $127,000 paid. In terms of marketing on deck for 2011, of course, someone mentioned earlier, the Reds going to the postseason is the best marketing tool that we can have. So we're excited about that possibility. Of course, the D-backs and the Rockies will be joining us this year, moving up from Tucson, so the dynamics are going to change a little bit. We're working with the teams right now to conduct a market survey of West Valley residents and residents from other West Valley cities that will tell us why or why not are they coming to the ballpark. So if they're coming, what are the reasons? We have some data, but if they're not coming or if they're driving down the street to another venue, why aren't they coming to our ballpark? So we're excited about the fruits of that effort. Of course, we've also picked up our social media opportunities through Facebook and Twitter. So we encourage everyone to sign up and get tweeted. We've worked closely with communications to utilize our website as more of a sales tool. So I invite everyone to look at the ballpark website and really see some of the sales aspects that are taking place there. The last thing, going into next year, our goal is to establish a brand and identity, and we will, we're known as the most fan-friendly facility in the Cactus League, and we're going to unveil something that everyone here will sure to be proud of. We don't want to show our cards just yet because of the competition factors, but we can tell you what it won't be, and what it won't be is the worst promotion in baseball history, 10-cent beer night at Cleveland Municipal Stadium that led to riots, and they actually had to cancel the game. So we're going to be very proud of our brand and identity that we're working to build, but it won't be 10-cent beer nights.
I suspect it won't be bat promotions either.
Probably not on the same night. No. Yeah. Some of our ticket promotions, of course, we had Spring Breaker Blowout Days, fun packs. We offered families for $40 to come out, 4 tickets, 4 dogs, 4 chips, 4 drinks. To come out and enjoy the ballpark and watch a game. We also reached out to Goodyear residents. We had discounts there, senior discounts, on and on and on. So we will look to expand those and create more opportunities.
You were saying the ladies' attendance is down. Maybe you ought to think about having a ladies' day, like many of the parks do. Yeah,
we will look at that.
They had a ladies' day.
How about having more night games, or is that directed? Because I think the night games seem to have been packed.
The night games did okay. Nothing is, the biggest driver during spring training, through my experience, is the teams that are playing on the field. Night games, part of the spring training attraction, I believe, is to play hooky from work, pull the kids out of school a little early, and take them to the ball game. Our night games did okay. And we are pushing for more night games. That's dictated by the teams. It's a little different on their schedules, so teams prefer the day games. Overall guest satisfaction, we always aim to deliver the complete fan experience. We feature the best kids zone in the Cactus League. It's sponsored by Estrella Falls. Kids run the bases, play catch on the field. This year we introduced ballpark experiences where someone had an opportunity. We grouped tickets with an on-field photo, or we grouped tickets with throwing out a first pitch. And it went very well for the first year. Additionally, we're very fortunate to have Bob Fowler and George Foster on site at every game, signing autographs, fan appreciation days. These promotions have really, you measure the success by people that are participating in the promotions, but also what other venues are following suit. And we're happy to say that other venues are following this suit. It's something that was really never part of Cactus League spring training baseball until we opened.
Something else that may sound a little hokey, but really for the month of March, if our whole city, in a sense, became festive of it being spring training. You think about going to Payson and they have their 100-year rodeo. Well, you drive into town and what do you see from one light pole to the next across the road it's the Payson Rodeo. You would see maybe flags on light poles, and I understand we have an issue with APS, but even in the parking lots of all of our commercial centers, that It's spring training month. You know,
That's a
I mean,
great point.
if you bring the festiveness just to our own community, that's all part of it. I think that just generates, you know, as you were saying, getting the West Valley enthused for spring training.
So that's a great point. And Mike, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, just very quickly, as part of the spring training wrap-up with the teams, the Indians expressed an interest to financially participate in what is commonly known as wayfinding, making sure people know their way to the ballpark and also know that spring training is going on. We are definitely investigating our little upside-down U signs in the blank spaces there to point people towards the ballpark, but also the commercial parking lots in the retail centers. We have met with planning. It is permitted by city code. We have to get permission from each of the property owners to do that, but it is something that we have just started investigating.
Well, it draws attention to the center, too. I mean, just like it was the holidays, it's still, you know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Overall guest satisfaction, how we performed with our guests. We collected over 500 surveys, either outreach effort or someone coming into guest services to fill out a comment card. And this is the fruit of the hard work of all the staff. Friendliness staff, 4.86 out of 5. Cleanliness of facility, 4.88. The overall fan experience, 4.76. Very, very good number. What this tells us is that even though people had a reason to go to guest services and ask for a comment card, they still rated their overall guest satisfaction very, very high. We're very proud of that number. Some of the things we're looking at for 2011 with regards to guest satisfaction, we're reviewing our food and beverage policies to see if we're as fan-friendly as some of the other facilities. We're looking at promotional giveaways. Everyone loves fireworks, of course. Pavilion post-game activation. Everyone wants autographs and access to players, so those are some things we're working with the teams on. The main preparation effort for spring training from a fan's perspective goes into our volunteer and staff training. Over 350 volunteers, part-time paid staff members go through basically very centrally focused customer service training. Grassroots program. Basically, we teach Disney, and we want that Disney experience for all of our guests. Looking at the revenues for spring training, they were up 18% from 3.5 to 4.2. These are gross revenues. You can see the amount associated with tickets was the biggest driver, and that was 1.8. On the next slide goes into ticket revenue and looks a little more closely. From 2009 to 2010, there's a 17% increase with regards to tickets. One of the things to note is the average ticket price of $16.75. Very, very good price per ticket. The teams coming from Florida were probably in the $11 to $12 range. So through our pricing models, we've been able to capture a pretty high average price per ticket. Concession revenues, they're up 21%. Important to note, someone was mentioning, we had previous discussion about how much is each fan worth to us when they're sitting in the ballpark. Well, each fan's spent an average of $10.33 on concessions. That is a slight decrease compared to the previous year, but colder than average temperatures early in the season hurt our wet sales.
Nobody wanted beer?
Nobody wanted beer when it's cold. An interesting note, we sold 56,000 hot dogs, and if you line those 56,000. If you line those hot dogs up from end to end, it'll stretch from Goodyear city limits to Goodyear city limits. Basically, Dysart, the width of the city from Dysart to Cotton Lane. Interesting info for you. Novelty sales saw a 6% increase. Our per cap in novelties did go down a bit from $7.13 to $6.20. And again, we're talking per cap, we're talking per body in the ballpark spending. And that's basically two reasons. One, the novelty of all the inaugural merchandise had an impact on year two. And secondly, we had other teams' fans in the ballpark. And when we saw large games, our per caps went down, which tells us that we had opposing teams' fans in the ballpark. And again, just due to overall team popularity. Parking revenue saw a 25% increase. Sponsorship revenue, 35% increase, $310,000. 100% of billboard inventory was sold. Of note, we went from 38 total sponsors and an average of $6,100 spend to 60 sponsors, which decreased our average spend a little bit to $5,100. But still very, very good sponsor activity. It's important to note that this program was recently received the Gold Award by the International Festival and Events Association for Best Overall Sponsorship Program. This is the second year in a row that Goodyear has earned that mark. So it's the International Festival and Events Association Best Sponsorship Program, not in the nation, but in the world. And there's some of our sponsors there that we hope to add to in the upcoming year.
Got tire, too.
What does this mean to us after splits are made and expenses are paid? City this past year ended up with $1 million, and then the teams at about $700,000. It's important to note that the charity game this year, in which the teams donate their portions to charity, generated $30,000 this year. Minimize expenses. This is one of the ways that we're doing that. Volunteer utilization, valued at over $200,000 if these were paid volunteers. We have the best volunteers in the world. They show up to training. They dress to impress. They treat everyone like they're walking into their front house, their front door. They stand up for long periods of time. They do a fantastic job, and it saves the city money. Estimated economic impact. Cactus League conducted a Cactus League survey in 2007. The binder for how they get to these numbers and the multipliers is about 4 inches thick. And based on those 2007 numbers, if we plug our information in, it shows a total economic impact of $22 million. And again, that's using 2007 data. So the spending patterns are much differently today. The Cactus League is looking at conducting another survey this year. Retail sales tax, we can look at what the impact was. So we talked about economic catalyst and using the facility as that. If we look at April returns, 2008 compared to 2010, we saw a 32% increase in retail sales tax. And that's without the increase. That's without the tax increase.
Without the 0.5%, it was 32%.
With the tax increase, it's a 65% increase for that month. Restaurant and bars also saw a spike. From 2008 to 2010, they experienced a 46% increase. Hotel saw a 16% increase during spring training.
Quite a spike.
Again, all this ties back to the vision, being like no other, using the facility as an economic catalyst.
Nathan, with that driver being $22 million, is there anything at the state level to try to help out the cities, with the burden it puts on our general fund to kind of kick some money in to this, since it is an overall state economic driver? And it would be nice if they're working on any plans at the state level to kind of throw some money in towards our way to help offset some of those costs. I know it's maybe wishful thinking, but it would be helpful because they always pride themselves on that $22 million, but it cost us, to do that. So.
Yeah, I would say that would be something that we can take to Romina to investigate a little bit further at the legislative level. But thank you.
Non-spring training approach, where do we fit? We have 4 like facilities in the West Valley with similar amenities. What used to be popular destination points for facilities like ours are no longer because we're competing with open farmland right off I-10. I'm not sure if you've seen that, where they set up for concerts, Fear Farm, and they have a soccer facility there as well. Basically, Promoters love that type of venue. They can come in, they can control every single revenue stream possible. They control concessions, they control food and tickets. They're not coming into a facility where there's already some predetermined contracts. So that's basically where do we fit. We feel our primary fit is for youth and adult amateur baseball tournaments, festivals, trade shows, private corporate events, and then other civic activities. We talked a little bit about our challenges and the market saturation. Additionally, with outdoor venues, there isn't a whole, our usage time is somewhat limited to the weather, meaning we have the teams from January through March. We're basically in spring training mode at that time. So then we have April, May, June, and then it gets into July, August, where the heat is almost unbearable to do anything outside. But we're trying. But that's just basically some of the challenges that we're dealing with. And of course, soft economy. We've had some arts and crafts shows on the books to be canceled because the activity just isn't there from their vendors to make that happen.
We also had a Veterans Day concert slated for last year that canceled. Went to a venue similar to what Nathan was referring to, where they can control and capture all the revenue streams.
Have you had anything canceled this year?
I'm sorry?
Have you had anything that was scheduled that got canceled this year?
Not this year. Not at this point, no.
Okay.
Which is good.
That's good.
Our main strategy, 99% of our ballpark or practice field or recreational complex use comes from relationships. So relationships that we have in the baseball community, relationships that we have with different promoters, different businesses. So we're really focusing a lot of our efforts there in developing and maintaining these relationships, whether it's through the Maricopa County Sports Commission or through chamber events. Basically, that's ongoing for us. We're now having to use non-traditional approaches where, the days of a renter, someone coming with an event and bringing it to your facility and paying rent are pretty much non-existent. We're having to get more creative and bring more tools to the table to assist that promoter with having the events here and leveraging some of our existing contracts to make that happen. Whether it's using our purchase ability to help advertise the event or utilizing Ovations and working with them to reduce some of their costs to make it more feasible to capture some of these events. And again, along with that, sponsorship generation. I want to give you an idea quickly, a quick case study of how we're using these tools and how it's making events come to fruition. Relay for Life, very popular event. It was interested in having the event at the ballpark. Well, they didn't have any rental budget to pay for rental fees. We're going out seeking sponsorship basically to help cover those costs for the rental facility. We get our rental costs covered, they get to utilize the facility, and it's a win-win. So just how we're using those tools of the toolbox. 4th of July event, this is probably one of our major successes. This event has been subsidized by the city up to $60,000 for the past several years. In 2 years, we've been able to take this event and massage it. Last year in 2010, we actually recovered 89% of the cost of doing the 4th of July event. Very, very successful event. We had 14,000 people attend that event.
Nathan, when there's outside events, the vendor, is it still a 50-50 split with the ball team, or do we get a larger percentage of the concessions and the food when it's not
That's a great question. Non-spring training revenue is all city.
Okay.
We don't split anything with the teams with regards to non-event spring training.
So if you can get them in there and they eat, then we get some money on the revenues on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What has this done for us to date? Actually, we started in 08-09. We opened up the facility. We had half the facility in September, and the ballpark in February. We had 18 events. That equated to 153 event days. Total revenue that first year, fiscal year, was $44,000. 09-010, you see the list growing. Number of events went from 18 to 38. number of event days from 153 to 428. And I know you're probably thinking, well, there's only 365 days in the year, but very rarely will we just have one activity going on at one time over the full property. So 428 event days. Of note, the revenue went from $44,000 to $200,000, something we're very, very proud of. On the book so far for next fiscal year, looking at increasing from 38 to 46, number of event days from 428 to 590, and increasing that revenue from $200,000 to $250,000.
All right.
How does that compare? And I always talk about you can get them on concerts, but I mean the venue, because you're competing with America West, you're competing with Desert Sky. I mean, and the acoustics or weather. I mean, is it possible to get more concerts out there, or is the venue, because of the nature, not conducive?
I don't want to say it's out of reach. We're actually working with Ticketmaster, who was recently purchased by Live Nation, who's a large concert promoter. And we basically told them, we don't want U2. We'll take Milli Vanilli. We're not getting greedy here. But I don't want to say it's impossible. It's just a little more challenging. I don't see America West as being our key competitor. Definitely the other facilities, but the open farmland off of the 101 and Cricket Pavilion, outdoor facilities being our main competition for concerts. Having said that, we've done very, very well on the baseball tournament side of things. This weekend we have the perfect game coming in. They're bringing 60 teams from across the nation. From September through basically mid-November, every field is booked every day, multiple times a day. And we're bringing Men's Senior Baseball League and the National Adult Baseball League. We've done a really, really good job of securing multi-year contracts for use of these facilities. And it's great weather, great time for baseball. People are visiting Goodyear to play.
Oh, the car show. That's great, too.
In addition to that, we've also found a niche with graduations in May. We opened up with one this past year. Next year we have 5 to potentially 8 on the books for graduation with the high school. So we're very pleased with that. Additionally, something that's very important is all the community use in which the community is coming out and utilizing the facility. So we're looking for opportunities. The Parks and Recreation Department, our department, the Little League program, every kid that played in Goodyear Little League played 2 of their Little League ball games on the main ball field in April and May and June. On the big field, just like the big leaguers did. It was very, very well received. From T-ball all the way up through juniors.
So they can use that big field.
We absolutely. We did some minor modifications, and the cameras were out. Parents were in the stands. Parents were coming out on the field after games, taking a picture of Johnny standing at home plate. It was fantastic. One of the other things we did is we reached out to the local high schools, the Goodyear high schools, and we said let's create an annual event to feature your varsity teams. A Goodyear baseball high school night. And so we had all 3 high schools play a different opponent on the same night. It was a triple header. We charged a little gate, cover our expenses, and high school players were treated just like big leaguers. Their names were on the scoreboard, the announcer was going, music in between innings. It was quite festive, and that will also be ongoing. We have the little leaguers, the high schoolers. We also have our senior population that is getting involved as well. We've reached out to the Pebble Creek Men's Softball Club, and they will now have one of their game days inside the Goodyear Ballpark. So we're trying to hit every demographic and sharing use of this great facility.
If that goes well, we can make that work on the ballpark field. It gives us the ability to take our recreational softball leagues and give them an opportunity to play. It adds a lot of value to their league and their experience, and it will be something that creates an opportunity for those teams that is unlike any other softball league around. It adds value, potentially adds fees as well.
Another area that we're breaking into now is we have 2 weddings on the book as well. So we're expecting those to go well and to increase that number. So So we're pleased to date with the number of off-season events and how it's trending and showing growth opportunities.
Have you looked at marching band festivals?
We, not specifically yet, but that is next on the...
Or drum and bugle corps. Denver has a big drum, that thing is real big. And there's nothing down in the Southwest. I
think you just made our maintenance supervisor cringe when he heard marching band, because traditionally they
just ruins the fields.
True.
I think he's here today.
All right, Nathan can take a break. On deck, CBC recommendations. We just wanted to circle back with you all based on the 3 recommendations that were provided associated with the ballpark back in March and April. One of them is seat licensing. That came up a couple of times, and the purpose behind seat licensing is the best equation I can give you is that anytime you pay like an initiation fee associated with a membership for a fitness club. Seat licenses, however, require a high demand for season tickets. We don't have a large season ticket base. Most of them are mini plans or single game purchases. So to do a seat license is not feasible for a spring training facility. You'll hear about them in NFL stadiums where there's really, really high demand and people want to keep their seats and pass them on to their family from generation to generation. That doesn't occur with spring training. It doesn't even occur for the Cubs, which is the highest drawing team in the Cactus League. So it's not a very feasible opportunity for us. But we did research it a little bit and found that it's not something we can really move forward with at this time. Naming rights is an interesting one. There is a lot of value for the Goodyear Ballpark to remain named the Goodyear Ballpark. It is a destination location. It says that it's in Goodyear. We obviously want people to come to Goodyear. However, we do have a proposal, if you would prefer for us to kind of move forward with exploring the feasibility of naming rights, we can do that. We would cost us about $5,000-$6,000, but we would get an opportunity to determine what the market is to name the Goodyear Ballpark something else. But that we feel is a policy decision at the City Council level and something we would like direction from you all on. Just so as a point of interest, though, again, going back to the Cubs, they did not have a feasible financial proposal come to them to name their facility, and again, they generate the most fans per game in the Cactus League.
Are any of them named? I don't think so.
Tucson Electric is the only spring training in the Cactus League that's named, and now that's vacant.
So there are no active right now that have named.
There are none active in the Cactus League. There are some in Florida.
And the last one is the bonus commission structure. This was brought up based on trying to have the ballpark operate as a business, which we do, and on a profit-loss standpoint. I think the first thing to state is that that would create a very specific compensation package for a very small number of people in the city that would be unlike any other compensation package that exists. That's number one. Number two is the ballpark, as we know, like it or not, operates at an operating loss of $2.186 million. That is the general fund subsidy. So to create a bonus commission structure associated with that, knowing that it is a $2.186 million loss in those terms, seems a little bit difficult to wrap our brains around. But again, that's something that, from a policy perspective, we would want some direction from City Council on.
But won't that change, Mike, over the years?
The 2.186, it'll change a little bit. I think you will have some ebb and flow, but I think at the very least, at the height of Peoria's best amount of usage, and Nathan can speak to this a little bit more specifically. They were still in the neighborhood of a $1.5, $1.6 million subsidy. It was originally projected that we would be at 2.4, and we're working right now in a soft economy at 2.186. So there is room, but there's never been any expectation from day one, and I don't see it going forward that it will, quote-unquote, break even or turn a profit.
My bigger concern, even though I appreciate those comments, is to figure out a way, on the debt service, on what is it, STA, or figure out what their numbers are going to be and how to get more money from them into that system, because to me that's going to be the bigger cost than the operating piece of it.
It is.
Even though it all adds up, is to figure out a way to shrink that, those payments by getting more money out of the state and the sports authority that's paying us, and I know they have bigger issues right now. I'm hearing they have about anywhere from a 1 to a 1.5 billion shortfall maybe for their budget coming up. So they got bigger issues. But to me, if there's a way that Romina or whatever can work, or the mayor when he gets together with the other mayors to shrink that, to me that is the key. Long term.
It is, as Mr. Dalkey had pointed out, about three-quarters of the annual subsidy for the ballpark, correct?
But it also goes back to kind of what I had spoken at the last meeting with tourism in general, and really our region and how we can work together to promote ourselves, because it comes back to, the night we voted on this, and I said, I take this like my watch department, that cost me a ton of money and I hate it. But when the watch guy comes in with his Rolex and turns around and buys a pair of diamond earrings, I love I love the watch department. So, we're really looking at, we know that we're not going to make money here. Would love to break even on the operations. I know that sounds like a dream, but I would love to see that. But it's back to, so how do we help our hotels? How do we help our restaurants? How do we, at some point, someday find that great idea that came to us, 2 years ago, of the office complexes and everything else surrounding it. And so that's the key thing, is what it's going to bring in the long run, I guess.
Correct.
And it's tough to measure. We hear from people that visited during this first year of spring training and that are buying homes in the area now, moving to Goodyear. It's tough to measure and capture that type of impact.
Well, and I appreciate this presentation because, I'll be honest, this last year, it's been a thorn in my side, how much money we see goes out, and we really don't have any idea until you've came to us tonight on really what the obstacles are and what good it's also giving. And so I appreciate it, because I think we really needed to hear this when we know how much it's costing us. And
we are at a point of being done with conveying formal information to you. Can open it up to any additional questions you may have.
Questions? I know I have a comment or two. Questions or comments?
I thought you did a good job of hitting the key points, and again, anything where you could turn Romina loose to get some more money out of the state to shrink that shortfall, on the debt service, and especially in 2017, where if those estimates are accurate, creates a bigger problem. Anything to shrink that down, I think, looking out is the bigger issue in my view.
Thank you.
I think you guys have done a really great job, and I appreciate what you've brought to us, and appreciate the fact that we have brought some very quality people in, especially in our ballpark, and that is a plus for Goodyear. It gives us bragging rights that I don't think any other team has. I don't think we've got a staff that's near that quality. So keep going. You're doing great.
Thank you.
On the issues about Azte and the other mayors, and of course we've met on this, and I think we'll continue to meet. But it's really tough to bring more money to this equation. It isn't going to happen anytime soon. But certainly, what we do need to do is we need to, over the next couple of years, find a way to extend the Azte into the 2030 realm. And that way, at least, eventually, we will be repaid, reimbursed what we're supposed to be. It's actually, with the interest payments, and we're accruing interest today, that's very beneficial for us, or those of us, those who will follow us. It's going to be a nice payout over the next couple of decades. But I don't think Romina can help us here right now, but I think we do have to keep working with the other mayors and the Azte people to see what we can do. I guess my feeling on, I think this is one of the greatest things we provide our people in its various applications. But the one thing I am concerned about is I wonder if we can do more in bringing people from Ohio out here. You know, Ohio has some of the greatest sports fans in the world. The Ohio State Buckeyes prove that whenever they come here. And I talk to them, and Cleveland and Cincinnati are rabid fans. Cleveland's having a little difficulty today, but...
Last place, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I know.
It's only 28 games.
And the people aren't going to their field either. But can we form some private-public consortium that includes the Reds, the Indians, and Castellini, I think, would be open to this, and some of our restaurants and our hotels and us, to find a financial method in which we can really appeal to these people from Ohio to come here. And when they come here, there'll be opportunities for reductions in foods at the P.F. Chang's and the Marley's and those types of places, and good deals for a week at our hotels. You know, it's got to go beyond us. And I think the Reds and Indians would be willing to contribute to that particular. I believe they would. But we really need to tap that. That's our future success, is tapping that market, getting those people in our restaurants and our hotels for a week at a time. And so what we're doing for our people is outstanding, but we need to bring more money to the table from our friends in Ohio. And I think that if you could develop some strategy for that, I'm sure the private sectors would be willing to be a part of this.
We will definitely talk with the teams, Chamber of Commerce, and see how we can expand our efforts in Ohio, going forward.
Yeah, but by giving them good deals here.
Agreed. And I think your point of bringing the restaurants into play beyond hotels. I mean, I think there's packages, spring training packages that businesses set up to, discount airfare, discount hotel, discount car, similar what you would go on Orbitz. You get a volume discounting package. But I think to your point regarding food and beverage retail, that there are opportunities there that have, at this point, have not been tapped.
Yeah, and I think
we're doing some with travel agencies and working with groups that bring out parties from Ohio to Goodyear.
Right.
I did see that actually on one of their websites. I think it was the Indians once. They had their spring training.
Spring training tours, it's called.
Yeah,
right.
Something like that. Mm-hmm.
I think their owners want this, and let's not miss the opportunity to bring them into this.
We certainly can bring that up with the CFOs who deal with that and their folks that deal with that as we progress in our spring training meetings.
Yeah, and Bob Castellini has talked to me about it. So they want this. He wanted a strategy. He didn't have any suggestions.
So you need to do the strategy.
That's what we do.
Okay.
We good?
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot of information there.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good presentation. Thank you. Two professional people.
Well, we've done council members and city manager reports. Anything new?